So hello everybody, can everyone hear me? Yep, great. I'd formally like to welcome you all from all around the country and in fact, I guess across the globe tonight for joining this masterclass. I'm Vanessa Lee, one of the regional managers here at Bond, and I'm joined tonight by our keynote speaker, Executive Dean, Professor Nick James, and also by some of my colleagues from the Office of Future Students who will join me behind the scenes tonight to answer any questions that you may have about Bond, our programs and applying online. Now at the moment we do have everyone's microphones muted, so please do funnel any of your questions through to the chat room. You can access this via the little purple or pink tab that you can see on the bottom right of your screen. Also please note that we are recording the session for tonight for all those that can't make it. Now at Bond we always get a lot of interest in our law programs and with the emerging changes to technology, we thought it best to invite Professor Nick James to discuss the impacts of AI and the delivery that it's going to have into the delivery of legal services in Australia and how Bond is preparing our graduates to be competitive in this space. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Professor James to start this exclusive masterclass for you all.
Thanks very much, Ness, and it's a pleasure to be here and talking about a topic that I find extremely interesting, which is the impact that artificial intelligence and other emergent technologies like machine learning are having upon lawyers and upon the delivery of legal services. So the plan for this evening is that we're going to run the session as if we were running a class at Bond. So this will give you a little bit of insight into what it's like to participate in a class that's delivered remotely. Next semester, of course, we'll be delivering all of our programs and subjects in multi-mode, which means for those students who can come to campus, they can sit in the classroom, but for those students who are unable to come to campus, they can participate in classes remotely. So Ness has already pointed out how you access the chat channel. So as she said, if you look at the bottom right of your screen, there's a little pink tab thing. If you click on that, you're given a few options at the bottom of the little pop-out. The one on the far left that looks a bit like a word balloon, if you click on that, that shows you the chat channel, and so you should be able to see the messages that Ness and I have already posted. If you do have any questions about, robot lawyers and artificial intelligence during the presentation, feel free to type in your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. Similarly, if you've got questions along the way around Bond and enrolling at Bond, you can ask them in the chat channel as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up the slide presentation. Along the way, there'll be a few videos, there'll be a few interactive polls where I'll ask you what you think about particular things. So this is a moderately interactive session. Please join in and participate, and then we'll leave a little bit of time at the end to take any general questions you have about the topic. So to present an overview of what it is that I'll be speaking about this evening, I'll talk about the ways in which the legal services sector and what lawyers do is presently being disrupted by a whole range of factors that include the emergence of some exciting new technologies. I'll talk a bit about what artificial intelligence is at a very high level before we move on to look at the ways in which artificial intelligence is being used by lawyers and is in fact doing some of the things that were traditionally done by human lawyers. And then we'll wrap up with a bit of a chat about what this means for lawyers as a profession, and contrary to what that fourth point might indicate, this is certainly not the end of lawyers. So you might actually be wondering, why is the Dean of Law presenting on a topic about robot lawyers that might actually make people think twice about studying law? But the point that I'll be making throughout this presentation is that AI, rather than replacing lawyers, is in fact going to substantially enhance what it is that lawyers do, and in fact create a whole bunch of new opportunities for law graduates. So in my personal view, there's there hasn't been a more exciting time to study law and to graduate with a law degree and move into a very exciting new world of legal services. So that's the plan for this evening. I think the starting point, and to set the scene, I think I'm going to ask you first of all to answer this question for me, which is: have you personally ever actually engaged a lawyer, whether that's to provide you with legal advice or to facilitate a transaction or for whatever purpose? So I'm just going to put up a yes/no question for you, and all you need to do is click and just tell me yes or no. Have you ever personally engaged a lawyer? Okay, so there's our responses. A few people weren't able to get to the mouse on time and click a response. 17 people have in fact engaged a lawyer in the past, and 9 haven't. So that's actually a greater proportion than I would have expected. A lot of the time, at least half and often more than half of the audience have never engaged a lawyer. But we still have about a third of the group here tonight who've never engaged a lawyer. And that's one of the points that we'll be looking at this evening, which is the ways in which artificial intelligence is actually going to make it easier for people to access legal services. So setting the scene, I think in order to truly appreciate the impact that artificial intelligence and emergent technologies are having upon the ways in which lawyers work and legal services are delivered, you need to appreciate the way in which legal services were traditionally delivered. So in the past, and for many people it's still the case today, if you wanted to get legal advice from a lawyer, you would have to contact a law firm, you would make an appointment, you would usually go in person into the law firm, you would meet with often a senior member of the firm, one of the partners or senior associates. They would sit down and they would take your initial instructions. They would establish the relationship between you and the firm. They would work out what it is that you actually need the lawyers to do. And then they would go off and they would either themselves or with the assistance of more junior lawyers do some legal research, communicate with other parties, and eventually come back with a solution to your problem or an advice about what you should do next, and then assist you to achieve your chosen objective. Along the way, the lawyers would traditionally charge you for their time in assisting you, and the traditional method by which lawyers charge clients is called time costing. So they would keep track of every single minute that they spend working on your file and assisting you, and you would receive a monthly bill, often more than you might have expected, where you would pay the lawyers for doing the work for you at an hourly rate. You would occasionally return to the law firm to get updates, or sometimes they would communicate with you in writing about the progress of your file, and eventually, if it's a one-off transaction, they would resolve the matter for you. But if you're a client who has an ongoing a series of legal matters, then you would retain that firm for other legal matters. And ordinarily, there would be a very close relationship between you and the firm, so that you would end up referring most, if not all, of your legal matters to the firm. So that's the traditional model. It was traditionally quite a slow process of getting those instructions, going away, doing the research. Often, if your matter required the review of substantial quantities of documentation, it would be taking the days or weeks or sometimes even months to review all the relevant documentation. If your matter involved going to court, it would involve, again, months and in some cases years of preparing for trial. So it was very much a long-term relationship. So what's happened? What's changed? Well, the legal services sector is presently undergoing a significant period of disruption and transformation driven by a set of matters. So the first one is one that's been impacting professions and industries for the last couple of decades, which is globalization, internationalization. So traditionally, when you engaged a law firm, they would advise you about the local laws that applied to your legal matter, and if you needed advice about something you were doing in another jurisdiction or in another country, a lot of the time you would have to engage another law firm in that other jurisdiction or country to provide the advice. Now, globalization, including the globalization of commerce, has meant that many law firms have themselves become internationalized and globalized to make it easier for them to provide truly international legal advice and legal services to their clients. At the same time, legal matters have started to cross, it's become more common for them to cross international borders, so for legal matters themselves to actually be multi-jurisdictional. The other factor that's been driving change within the legal services sector is diversification of delivery models. So that traditional model of the law firm providing legal advice, of course, it still exists. In many ways, it's still the dominant model. But what we've seen in the last few years is the emergence of alternative models for the delivery of legal services. A whole new movement known as New Law that deliberately tries to turn on its head those traditional characteristics of engaging a lawyer, including things like time costing, and doing it in a very different way, which for many clients has significant appeal. So that's been driving change as well. Growing competition from alternative business models for the delivery of legal services. Of course, there's been generational change. I think many of us are conscious of the fact that baby boomers and Generation Xers and millennials and Gen Ys and so on have very different characteristics. And as the demographics of the clients and of the lawyers themselves has changed over the last few years, the ways in which lawyers deliver legal services to clients has changed as well. But of course, the driver for change that we're talking about this evening, and the one that's having an extremely significant impact, is the emergence of new technologies that are transforming the way lawyers actually do their work and deliver legal services to clients. And I think we're all, again, very conscious of the fact that we're in the middle of a revolution, and so some scholars have pointed out that in many ways we're in a fourth industrial revolution. So if the first industrial revolution was steam engineering in the 1700s, and then the emergence of the assembly line in the 1800s led to the second industrial revolution, and then more recently computing and the internet led to a third industrial revolution. What we're seeing now with the emergence of a whole range of exciting and disruptive new technologies is a fourth industrial revolution. Things are changing so quickly at the moment that the only way to describe it is as a revolution. Now, there's a whole range of technologies that are impacting the law and the delivery of legal services, but the one, of course, that we're focusing upon this evening is artificial intelligence. So I think it's going to be useful to just clarify our definition, and artificial intelligence is one of those terms that's used in different ways by different people. And there's an enormous body of scholarship around what is artificial intelligence, but for our purposes this evening, we can simply define it as the ability of a computer or a computer-controlled robot to perform tasks commonly associated with intelligent beings. So it's the ability for machines to do things that we would normally associate with human beings. So we need to clear away a few misconceptions first of all. I mean, artificial intelligence is sometimes underestimated and sometimes overestimated in terms of its impact, and in fact overestimation is probably the more common response. Artificial intelligence is a trope or a concept that's explored in popular culture in a variety of media. So there's lots of wonderful movies like Ex Machina, or television programs like Westworld, and novels that explore the nature and the impact of artificial intelligence. And many people think that that's what is happening right now, and that the robots are taking over the world, and that we're all in many ways doomed to be replaced by our superiors. But when you actually engage with what's really happening with artificial intelligence, while there are a lot of very exciting things that are happening, we are nowhere near the point where we have sentient robots that are threatening to take away our jobs and hijack our lifestyles. So on the screen there, I've got 4 different types of artificial intelligence. On the left, the simplest type of reactive AI, which is useful for classifying and recognizing patterns. It's very mechanistic and formalistic. It's certainly nothing like sentience. It's just a very sophisticated processing mechanism. The second type of AI has a limited memory, which means it's able to recall and learn from its mistakes. That's a much more sophisticated form of AI, and that's the type of AI that I'll be speaking about primarily this evening. That's the type of AI that is being used more and more frequently by lawyers. And then we move over into the theory of mind model of AI, the AI that's able to understand human motives and reasoning and can deliver personal experience to everyone based on their motives and needs. That's a kind of empathetic, very sophisticated AI that doesn't actually exist yet. And many people think we're a long way from having AI with that level of sophistication. It's the goal that many AI engineers and scholars are working towards, but it's not happening anytime soon. And then at the high end is the kind of the sci-fi version of AI, the artificial intelligence that's self-aware, that's sentient, that has human level intelligence or even beyond human level intelligence. That does not exist yet, and it's a long way off. So our focus needs to be upon those first 2 types of AI because they're the ones that we have now, and they're the ones that are already impacting the delivery of legal services. So let's talk about some of those. I think the interesting thing about AI is that what it's doing is something that computers have been doing all along. So anybody that studied the way computers work at high school or read about it knows that it comes down to very simply input, processing, and output. You put information into a computer, it does something with the information, and then it spits out something that's useful. So at the simplest level, think of a calculator or the calculator app on your phone. Your input is you plug in 2 + 2. The calculator processes that and comes out with the result, and it spits out the output being the answer, which is 4. AI is in many cases a very sophisticated version of that process. So if you think about a translation app, so say you're using Google Translate, you're inputting the words that you want or the phrases that you want translated. The app is then through whatever mechanism analyzing the possible translations of that phrase. So when it comes to Google Translate, for example, it's doing an online search of instances where that phrase in English, say, is associated with a phrase in, say, Mandarin, and counting and working out which is the most common matching in order to then produce an output, which is a hopefully very accurate Mandarin translation of the English phrase. That process of, rather than matching the phrase word for word using a dictionary, but actually searching the internet for associations of English and Mandarin phrases, actually produces a much more accurate translation of a phrase, to the point where a few years ago it was acknowledged that Google Translate had exceeded human translators in terms of accuracy. And then AI goes even further than that. So you, when it comes to, for example, a legal AI, you might input a question about the law asked in natural language. So you've just asked a normal question in English. The AI is able to do research, review vast numbers of legal documents in order to identify the best possible answer to that question, and then it produces an output which again is often very sophisticated in terms of being expressed in plain English, in natural language, or even in some cases spoken aloud by the computer or by the machine. In many ways, that is what we do as humans as well. When we engage in activity, we take in information, we think about it, and we do something with the information. It's what lawyers do. Lawyers they take in a request for advice or a problem they need to solve. They go off and they do research and they think about the potential answers, and then they produce an advice, either verbally or in writing. So that input, process, output is the way lawyers operate. That input, process, output is the way artificial intelligence operates. And so it's almost inevitable that there's going to be a point where what AI does starts to intrude upon what it is that lawyers do. Of course, the added feature of artificial intelligence that makes it even more sophisticated is the fact that it's now able to learn from its mistakes. So in the process of analyzing or evaluating or thinking about the information or the problem, it's able to produce a possible answer. That answer is reviewed by someone. They provide feedback, as in this is good, bad, this is right, this is wrong. Then the artificial intelligence is able to revise its potential answer and keep doing that and learning from its mistakes over and over until the quality of the answer it's able to produce is extremely accurate. That's what we call machine learning. So as I said, what artificial intelligence is now doing is starting to impact upon the things that human lawyers have traditionally done. So what I want to do is have a quick look at a series of things that in the past a human lawyer would have done, and look at the ways in which artificial intelligence and machine learning and bots are actually starting to do some of these things. So we're going to look at the way lawyers and the way bots can complete forms, which is actually much more exciting than it sounds, review documents, conduct research, predict outcomes, make decisions, and then at the highest levels actually advocate on someone's behalf. We'll talk about whether or not artificial intelligence can actually prepare a legal argument. So let's have a look at each of those. So the first that artificial intelligence in the form of a very simple bot is able to do is start to complete forms. Now that sounds quite boring and mundane, but what I'm talking about here is not just the ability of a bot to gather information from a human client and then plug in the relevant parts of that information into a form, which is a very relatively simple process. But what a bot can now do is extract information from a human client by way of a natural language conversation. So by the bot asking a series of easily interpreted questions, which the human can answer, and then the bot can take those bits of information and plug them not just into a form, but into a letter, so a letter of complaint or a letter of demand, and can do that very, very quickly. So what I've got on the screen there is the website for an organisation based in the UK known as Do Not Pay. And so this was started a few years ago by a law graduate who had a particular who felt particularly annoyed by parking tickets that were issued in unjust circumstances. So occasionally people get parking tickets where they really shouldn't have been given a parking ticket. And the process of getting a parking ticket cancelled is relatively simple. You just write a letter to the local authority, but the letter has to be written in the right way in order to be effective, and most people don't really have that ability. So somebody who's given a parking ticket who is very unhappy with the circumstances could approach a lawyer to do something about it, but as we've seen, that's quite an intimidating process, and it can be quite expensive. So most people end up just copying the fine or not paying it, and then going through a very stressful legal process. And so what this guy did was he developed a simple bot, which was freely available online, where people could be asked and answer a series of questions, and the bot would help them to draft a letter, which they would then send themselves to the local authority and get the parking ticket reversed. And then Do Not Pay expanded to include a similar service in relation to a whole bunch of matters in which people may like to complain. So what I want to do is I want to show you an example of what that bot looks like in action. So give me a moment. Okay. So hopefully that's worked. So what we've got now is the bot, which has recently been updated, but this still shows you how the bot works, where a person is able to get some advice or get a letter drafted that will help them to seek compensation for a delayed flight. So this person has bought an airline ticket, the flight was delayed or cancelled, it led to them losing money, and what they want to do is write to the airline and seek compensation. So there's no audio with this video, so don't be alarmed because you can't hear anything. But what we can see on the screen is the interaction between the bot, which is the eyeball thing on the left, and the person on the right. And what you'll notice is that the person is actually responding to the questions using natural language. So instead of saying hello, they're going, hey, how are you? The bot responds, I'm great, thanks. What can I do to help? The person then answers as if you were texting someone. So the bot is able to understand things like sure as yes, and I think so as yes, and then is asking a series of very simple questions, including the name of the person, the flight that they were on. It asks where the flight was meant to go, Malaga. The bot says that sounds very exotic, so it's quite a friendly bot. It asks for the booking reference, it asks for the date, time, all very simple, bang, there it is. So the letter was drafted instantly. The happy customer types, you are the best, and it's done. So that took, what, less than a minute for the customer to, or for the client to get a letter, which they can now print off or paste into an email, send off to the airline, and hopefully get their compensation. So that's Do Not Pay. So as I said, that's a UK platform, but that technology has, of course, been adopted around the world. So there's Joseph, which now provides that tool to law firms so that they themselves can develop that sort of interactive bot to allow them to more easily assist their clients. And we've even more recently seen these sorts of initiatives emerge. So this is a site that went up in the last few weeks, powered by the Joseph platform as it happens. But what this does is it actually makes it very easy for people to lodge a formal complaint about the Victorian Police. So same sort of mechanism. It's a bot that asks a very simple series of questions in natural language. Person can answer, and then what it produces at the end is a formal letter of complaint about police misconduct that can then be submitted to the Victoria Police and hopefully get a result. So that, as I said, that went up online just a few weeks ago and is already proving to be an enormously useful tool. These sorts of platforms and bots are becoming much more common. They aren't taking work away from lawyers, because most of the time these apps and bots are assisting people who would not otherwise be able to afford a lawyer themselves, or for whatever reason would be unable to access legal services. So a lot of these bots are about enhancing access to justice, assisting people who would not ordinarily be able to get any assistance at all. So here's my next question for you. Would you trust legal advice provided by a bot with no human intervention whatsoever? Tell me what you think. Yes or no? So there's our results. So 9 people couldn't get to the their laptop on time, but very clearly 23 people said no, only 4 people said yes, which is a fantastic endorsement for the point that I'm making in this presentation, is that the emergence of these technologies is not going to suddenly replace human lawyers, because many people would still very much prefer to engage a human lawyer, particularly in more serious legal matters. Now, we'll return to that question a little later on in the presentation. So that's the first type of legal task that we're seeing bots have an impact upon, and that's the preparation, the drafting of letters and the filling in of forms. The second one is the review of documentation. So a big part of what lawyers, particularly junior lawyers, do is they actually have to read large quantities of information. So, for example, if you were about to rent a shop within a shopping center, you might be given a very detailed lease document by the landlord, and you might go to your lawyer and say, look, can you read this for me and tell me what it means? That's a very common legal task. It gets more and more complicated the larger the client and the larger the quantity of documentation. So if it was in fact the landlord who was engaging the lawyer, or if it was somebody who was, say, purchasing a shopping center who would engage the lawyer, that purchaser of the shopping center may have 20, 30, 50 commercial leases that they want their lawyers to review and present advice about. And so you end up with quite a substantial quantity of documentation, which could take weeks, if not months, for a human lawyer to review. And so what we've seen now is AI being used to review that sort of substantial quality of documentation very, very quickly and produce meaningful analyses of those documentation. So you might program the AI to review tens of thousands of pages of documents and look for particular meaningful pieces of information within those documents, and then the AI would review that very, very quickly, much more quickly than a human could, and then produce a meaningful report. And so we're seeing platforms like Kira, for example, or Luminance, and there are others that law firms are now using in order to be able to provide their clients with advice that is much more accurate and delivered much, much more quickly than it was in the past. The third task that lawyers traditionally did that is being impacted by bots and AI is the actual engaging of legal research. So legal research, and at least how it's taught at law school and how it's conducted by most lawyers, involves going out, reading a bunch of cases, reading legislation, reading regulations, reading often academic scholarship in order to understand and get a problem and get an answer to a particular question. This is again something that AI is now being trained to do instead of the human lawyers. So what I'm going to do now is show you, it's a promotional video that's been produced by IBM promoting their AI that's used for legal tasks that's known as ROS. It's a little bit light and breezy, but I think it makes the point quite well. So give me a moment to share that.
Todd's an exceptional lawyer with tons of clients. Todd doesn't understand artificial intelligence and probably thinks machines could take over the world. But in an ever-changing legal market, he knows that he's got to remain competitive. But Todd's stuck in the mundane and repetitive task of legal research that's weighing him down with unbillable hours and hardly any time to focus his time on what's most important, his clients. So Todd turned a new leaf and put his trust in artificial intelligence with Ross, his own personal artificially intelligent researcher. Ross has access to a vast legal database that effortlessly reads through and finds numerous answers for any legal question. You can ask Ross questions in natural language, the same way you would any other lawyer. Ross runs in the cloud, can be set up in seconds, and literally takes just minutes to master. All you need is an internet connection. No more wasted time on training sessions and lessons. Ross gives Todd more time to focus on his clients, which has definitely changed Todd's opinion about artificial intelligence. So join Todd and hire Ross today. Purchase a subscription at rossintelligence.com. Let Ross help you accomplish more than you ever thought humanly possible.
So this is a tool that generally isn't publicly available. So this is a bot that isn't helping members of the public. Rather, it's a tool that is used by lawyers themselves, and the fact is that it's actually extremely expensive to get a subscription to something like Ross, but it's a tool that's being used by lawyers to, again, enhance the quality of the advice that they're providing to their clients. So obviously that was Ross is a North American product, although it is there are Australian versions that are on track to come into our jurisdiction. But there are other platforms very similar to Ross, like Alira, which is again available to Australian lawyers to provide legal research services in particular niche areas. So Alira provides advice in relation to Australian taxation law, but the principle is essentially the same. A lawyer can use the platform to ask questions in a natural language. The bot then goes off and reviews enormous databases of legal information and produces meaningful answers to those questions. So the fourth task is to predict an outcome. And by that I mean that many people go to lawyers with a particular problem or a dispute that they're having with another person, and what they want to know is, if this matter were to go to court, would I win? Is this worth litigating? Is this worth prosecuting? And so what we now have is tools like BlueJay, which is a legal prediction platform, which is able to review enormous quantities of previous decisions of the courts, and then looking at the particular facts of the client's dispute, make a credible prediction about the likely outcome if the matter were in fact to go to court. Again, it's a task that was traditionally done by human lawyers, but is now being enhanced and sped up by a bot, by AI. The fifth thing, which I want to diverge a little away from what lawyers do and talk very briefly about what judges do, which is, of course, actually make the decisions in a legal dispute. What we're seeing is increasing reliance upon artificial intelligence by judges themselves when they're making their decisions. So rather than spending enormous amounts of time reviewing, for example, the type of sentence that a judge may have handed down in the past in relation to a particular crime, the bot, the AI, is able to review enormous quantities of previous decisions about that very particular legal question, and then let the judge know, look, in the past, the average sentence or the average damages order for this type of matter in these circumstances is X, and then the judge can be reassured that they're making a decision that's consistent with precedent. What we're now starting to see in other jurisdictions, it's not happening in Australia yet, but in other jurisdictions, is actually using the AI bot to make the decision itself. So replacing the human judge with a bot in order to provide a much faster and a decision that's much more consistent with previous decisions. Now that's proving to be quite popular with lower end types of legal matters, so legal disputes involving relatively small sums of money. So let me ask you this question. Would you let a bot decide the outcome of your dispute about, say, $1,000 debt? So let's say you're trying to get, you've bought something for $1,000 from a business, you think it's effective and that you're entitled to a refund. They're insisting that you're not entitled to a refund. There's a stalemate. You just want it sorted out. Would you use a bot, assuming that the other side has agreed to the outcome as well? Would you use a bot to resolve that particular matter? Yes or no? Okay, so that's interesting, because what we're seeing now is that a clear majority of the group would use a bot for a relatively simple legal dispute. Let me ask you this question then. Would you let a bot decide the outcome of your dispute about the custody of your children? Yes or no? So it's a family law dispute, and as predicted, everybody has answered that one very quickly, and there's clearly a preference. When it comes to that type of legal matter, there is very much a preference for still having a human being provide that sort of legal assistance and legal advice. The final task I want to talk about this evening is the ability to advocate. Now, by advocate, I mean argue on behalf of someone. And that's something that people are looking for when they engage a lawyer. They want somebody to speak on their behalf in relation to a particular dispute. Now, that may be in the courtroom, and of course that's a classic role of a lawyer, to stand up in court and argue on behalf of a client, but it's also very common in relation to non-litigious matters where you just want somebody to argue on your behalf in relation to a dispute that's perhaps taking that's taking place outside of the courtroom. So advocacy is a very common role engaged in by lawyers, and that requires quite sophisticated legal expertise, so the ability not just to communicate in a very persuasive way, but also an ability to think about the situation and come up with persuasive arguments that are going to hopefully persuade the other side, or if the matters are going to take place in the courtroom, to persuade the judge or the judge and jury. Now you might think, well, that's certainly the kind of thing you need a human being to do. I can't imagine robots ever being able to persuade a jury. But let me show you this.
I would like to offer a different view.
It's one small step for machine, one giant leap for machine kind. IBM's newest artificial intelligence system took on experienced human debaters and won a live debate.
Subsidizing space exploration is like investing in really good tires. It may not be fun to spend the extra money, but ultimately both you and everyone else on the road will be better off.
Called Project Debater, the system scans hundreds of millions of articles and journals to develop its position on a topic. Then it creates a narrative to support its argument.
It has to be able to understand language in a way that will enable it to figure out what are arguments that support its stand of the debate. So we have developed a machine learning algorithm. It has neural networks, deep neural networks in it. It has other machine learning technologies in it.
Project Debater took part in 2 debates, each consisting of an introduction, a 4-minute rebuttal and a concluding statement. And in the second debate, the Project Debater actually convinced 20% of people to change their minds in favour of it.
The AI even predicted and rebutted arguments before the human opponent made them.
They were learning what is the rationale behind how a debate is structured. How do you build an argument to make it persuasive?
IBM's Human Computer Challenges began in 1997 when Deep Blue beat world chess champion Garry Kasparov, and in 2011, IBM Watson won Jeopardy! But its researchers say Project Debater has applications beyond just winning debates, like in the legal and financial fields.
What we are trying to develop is a demonstration of technology that has a lot of power to aid human beings to expand their mind to get better insights.
Google is also developing an AI called Duplex that conducts natural conversations on the phone.
I'd like to reserve a table for Friday the 3rd.
In San Francisco, Lexi Savides, CNET.com for CBS News.
Allow me to respond to some of my opponent's most recent claims. I think that one of the claims made by Ms. Avadia was that people should choose how to spend their money. I would like to offer a different view. People should spend their hard-earned money as they please, but society has a duty to provide help to its people in need.
So what we have now is an AI that is able to be given a point that it's been instructed to make persuasively, and it's able to conduct the research in order to gather up arguments in support of its point. It's then able to organize that information into a persuasive argument, and then present that argument orally to an audience, or perhaps to a judge and jury. So now we are well and truly in the realm of what lawyers have traditionally done. I think the challenge for lawyers is the fact that the way that lawyers have been trained to reason in the past, and this is the sort of the algorithm that we teach law students when they first come to law school, is to approach a legal problem by identifying the issue, working out the relevant rule, applying it to the facts and reaching a conclusion. Because that thinking is very algorithmic, it is exactly the kind of thinking that an AI or a bot can be trained to do. And that is what I think has informed some of the early responses to these technological developments. So I've got three provocative images up screen. The first probably shows the initial response by the legal services sector to all of this, which is to say, none of this is really going to impact lawyers. Let's not worry about it. So a little bit head in the sand. Then there was a period of, oh, wow, this is really going to take away a lot of our work. Is this really the end for lawyers, perhaps? And around the time we started to see the publication of books like Richard Susskind's The End of Lawyers. But what we've seen in recent years is a realization that this is not going to end the legal profession. In fact, what it's going to drive is a radical transformation of the legal profession into something that is much better, much stronger, and much more effective. And that's why I'm incredibly optimistic about the impact that bots and AI and these other emergent technologies are going to have upon the legal profession and upon the prospects for law graduates. There's a few reasons why I'm so optimistic. The first is that many of these other emergent technologies are in fact creating exciting new areas of law and legal practice and prompting some very interesting legal questions. So if we look at a technology such as self-driving vehicles, just the existence of that technology creates a whole bunch of legal issues and legal problems and legal challenges. So very quickly, one of the legal questions that sit around self-driving vehicles is the question about what a self-driving vehicle should be programmed to do in the event of an inevitable accident. So let's say the car is driving along a busy road, and a car coming the other direction unexpectedly swerves into your lane, and you're heading towards a head-on collision, and the car has to make a choice. Does it collide with the car that's coming straight towards it, potentially seriously injuring the passengers in the vehicle, or does it swerve and crash into a cyclist, killing the cyclist? And so that's an ethical question and a legal question. Should the car be programmed to crash into the oncoming vehicle, injure the passenger, or swerve into a cyclist and kill the cyclist? And you might think, well, you know, killing someone is worse than someone being injured, so it should swerve, and so it should crash into the vehicle and only injure the passengers and not kill the cyclist. But now you've got a problem, because now somebody has to market these driverless vehicles with people knowing that they're programmed to injure the passengers in particular circumstances. Or the other classic dilemma is it can swerve into a cyclist that's wearing a helmet and injure the cyclist, or it can swerve into a cyclist who's not wearing a helmet and kill that cyclist. Which one should it swerve into? You might think, again, injury isn't as bad as killing. It should swerve into the cyclist wearing the helmet, I guess. But now you've created a situation where people will know that if you wear a helmet, cars are more likely to swerve into you, whereas if you don't wear a helmet, the cars are programmed not to hit you. So you've now created an incentive for people not to wear helmets when they ride bikes. So these are all the sorts of extremely challenging questions that that lawyers are needed to answer. And I think the other reason why I'm feeling so optimistic is something that's really come through in this presentation from your responses to the quiz questions, which is that not only can the technology not yet engage in the kind of creative, strategic thinking that the best human lawyers can engage in, but machines and bots can't replicate that human connection that many people are looking for when they need legal assistance. So we saw that when we said that if it came to a family matter where you're at risk of losing your children, you want a human lawyer to assist you, not a bot. And so what we've realized is that the emergence of these technologies is not going to replace lawyers. What it's going to do is to provide human lawyers with extremely useful tools to provide higher quality legal services much more quickly and much more efficiently. And so we're seeing this marriage of technology and humanity, and the successful lawyers of the future are the the cyborg lawyers that are able to combine the human side of legal services with the ability to engage technology in an effective way. And finally, the other reason for my optimism in this exciting era is the fact that all this technology is actually creating exciting new career pathways for law graduates. So rather than the traditional choice between being a solicitor and a barrister, there are new job roles and new job descriptions that combine legal expertise with digital expertise, with the ability to engage in creative thinking and design thinking, and all new jobs and opportunities have emerged in the last few years. So as I said, for those that are interested in being very daring and brave, you've still got the option of doing the classic Bachelor of Laws or the Juris Doctor, but programs like the Bachelor of Legal Transformation at Bond are actually designed to prepare you for some of these exciting new career opportunities in the legal services sector. So it's as I said, it's an extremely exciting time to study law and to emerge as a law graduate. I see that there's quite a few questions that have come through in the chat. I'll try and answer a few of them now. For those that have to rush off straight away, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you about this exciting topic, but I'll stick around for a few more minutes and answer some questions. So just looking at the chat, what do I think will be the transformation for human lawyers? I think the big change that human lawyers are going to go through and are already going through is the realization that some of the more repetitive and lower level tasks that lawyers do no longer need to be done by humans, and their focus now is upon the much more interesting and much more exciting high level creative strategic type thinking and problem solving. And so what we're finding in a lot of areas is that job satisfaction by lawyers has increased because the more mundane, dull, research-focused aspects of their role is now being taken over by the technologies. Will the advancement of AI, for example, the increasing ability to conduct research, replace the employment opportunities of junior lawyers? So that's an excellent question. So what we're seeing is indeed a narrowing of the range of opportunities to get into the traditional pathways. So law firms, for example, some of them are in fact taking on fewer law graduates, but at the same time, a broadening of other career opportunities in completely unexpected areas. So the whole new law movement, for example, is taking on law graduates that may have traditionally or in the past gone towards the more traditional law firm. So there's a narrowing of the old style career trajectory, but a broadening of the overall range of career opportunities for law graduates. Will the advancement, how will AI replace employment of senior lawyers? I think the point that came through by the end of this presentation, I hope, is that the senior lawyers, who are the ones who have the experience with working with clients and creating that very close personal relationship with clients, that is still valued, that is still needed. And when you talk to senior lawyers, they will tell you a lot, it isn't about their technical expertise anymore. That's how they got to being a senior lawyer. But by the time they become a very successful senior lawyer, it's more about the quality of the relationship they're able to create with their clients. And that's now what human lawyers can focus upon with the assistance of these new technologies that will take care of the non-human aspects of the role. How do lawyers deal with issues surrounding restriction on legal practice, especially in jurisdictions that are still conservative as regards the use of non-human bots to provide legal service? That's an excellent question. It is you, Temi. Temi, you're doing a PhD on this topic. So the answer is we get someone intelligent like you to explore that question in depth. But it's an excellent question. You should write a thesis on it. Kelsey asked, do you believe some areas of law, such as compensation law, will decrease in human activity while other more personal areas, such as family law, remain constant? I think that's a great question. There are some areas, applications for relatively modest amounts of compensation, where I think you're right. The bots are going to take over most of that work. But it's the criminal matters, it's the family law matters, and it's the high-end commercial matters where people are still going to want human intervention and human expertise. What is the implication of the application of AI to the legal service market for future like us? It's that you want to ensure that your journey through law school, your legal education, includes engagement with the use of these tools. And the good law schools, and there's other, including Bond, of course, are ensuring that the curriculum includes training in the ways in which lawyers are using these tools, so that when you emerge from law school, you are the type of person that these law firms, many of whom the older lawyers don't have that digital literacy, that comfort with these tools, are looking for young graduates who can help them to come to terms with these new technologies. So that's the implication for law graduates. Make sure you pay attention to this issue and train up and develop your digital literacies. We've got some excellent comments in the chat. So what sort of jobs will junior lawyers be doing in the future? Another great question. What we're seeing is a shift much more towards a team-based approach to delivery of legal services and multidisciplinary teams. So young law graduates now will often find themselves working, if they're not working in a law firm, working in organizations providing the legal expertise in working teams that have the financial expertise and the design thinking expertise and so on. So law graduates now are increasingly required to have the ability to collaborate and to collaborate with non-lawyers. And again, the good law schools are focusing upon developing that particular ability. Last question, what about ADR? ADR is in fact already well down the path of engaging these sorts of tools. So I mean, it's eBay, for example, has tens of thousands of disputes about transactions, most of which are resolved very quickly and easily using these sorts of bot type tools. So dispute resolution involving smaller commercial matters are ripe to be taken over by these sorts of technologies. But you have to remember, you need human lawyers to develop these technologies and ensure that they operate appropriately and within the bounds of the law. So I mean, that's my overall point here, is that human lawyers are here to stay. So it's just gone 6 o'clock, so I'm sorry I haven't been able to answer all of your questions. So we're going to wrap up now. Thank you very much, everybody, for making the time to come along and have a listen. And again, if you've got any questions about enrolling at Bond, Ness will point you in the right direction. So I'll pass you back to Vanessa now.
Thank you so much, Professor James. That was very insightful indeed. And I guess while it's evident that technology is going to make our lives better, it will still create a huge demand for lawyers in the future, which is good for those wanting to study law. And it's good to see that Bond is really ensuring the ways that we deliver our law programs will really future-proof graduates in this space. Anyone who is still interested to apply for Bond for our September intake, you can do so on our Bond website. Applications are still open, and also for our intakes next year. So simply jump on our Bond website, hit apply now, and start your future. Now, thank you so much for everyone joining us. Like I said, we've got people from all over the country and all over the globe joining us tonight, and we cannot wait to welcome you to the Bond campus. So thank you very much.